In the 10 days since Rosh Hashanah, we are asked to take stock of the year we have completed, to replay the films of our lives and candidly assess the truth about who we are and who we want to be. We're told to set our agenda, to make our agenda for the year ahead. Yom Kippur is a time to tackle the difficult issues, those we would rather not talk about, those we would like to brush under the table. And if you were to close your eyes and see yourself around your meal tables, your night out with friends, your moments with your closest loved ones, what do your conversations sound like? If your world is like mine, you will tell and hear recaps of achievements, life-affirming stories of joy and simcha, mitzvah and blessing, although the older my friends get, the more they talk about doctor's appointments. And you'll also hear about tales of life's difficulties, questions about how to be better, get better, move up or move on from the places of sadness and distress, anger or tragedy. But over my many years as a rabbi, I've been compelled by what I don't say and what I don't hear around those tables. The stories that are dismissed by the very words we use, get better, be better, it's okay. As a pastor, as a rabbi, as a human being, I know the needs of the heart that lead us to talk about our challenges in these terms. But on this, the night, we're commanded to open up a piece of ourselves. We must make room at the table for the silent story that is rarely discussed, the story of those that we know in our lives and those in our world, the stories of not okay, not better at all, maybe never okay. On this, the holiest night of the year, I want to offer a seat to the hidden stories of depression, anxiety, and the loneliness, loss, and grief that mental illness brings, but that we do not want to discuss as we share the telling of our lives. Over 24 years as a rabbi, I've seen just how many lives it affects. I've seen the suffering and the isolation, the strength and the resilience, the stigma, and the quiet commiseration. But for 24 years, I've been afraid to talk about it. But year after year, through those with mental illness, our own family members, our friends, our neighbors, and our coworkers, the story of the real living stays hidden. And so tonight, as Kol Nidre calls us to come out of hiding, to stand before the Holy One and truly face ourselves, I'm pulling up a chair for every person touched by mental illness and grief. Tonight, you will be found. As a people, we are not strangers to working head-on with the brokenness of our world. Since the 3rd century, for almost 2,000 years, the Mishnah's rabbinic teaching of Tikkun Olam has been inspiring our spirits and actions as Jews. So when we see poverty, social injustice, or communities in need, we know exactly how to give our time, our talent, and our financial resources. And we do it effortlessly. But why then do we feel so uncomfortable, embarrassed, or unskilled when it comes to how we reach out to and into the lives of those that we know intimately or love who suffer with mental illness? Perhaps we want to keep hidden what is hidden from us. As blogger Chloe Day writes, one of the hardest and most frustrating things about depression is that you can't see it. You can't put a pin in it, do a test, take an x-ray and say, yes, you have depression. Even to myself, she writes, I've often wondered if I was truly ill or not. This well reflects the world we strive to live in and want for those we love with mental illness. One where retrievable evidence leads to clear answers, and effective tools lead to mastery. But what are we to do, though, when the malady, when the illness, when the struggle is messy, that can't be cleaned up and put behind us? When we're faced with the things that we just might not be able to repair, what do? We do what seems kind, helpful, and best. Either we keep pushing to make it better, all better, or we just don't talk about it at all, thinking, why pour salt on an open wound? The media around us adds to our discomfort. A study by the Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institute of Health was done surveying news coverage of mental illness from 1995 to 2014. What do you think was the topic primarily associated with mental illness in the United States? 55% of the stories were about violence, either against others or self-inflicted. Research suggests that the focus may exacerbate social stigma and likely our own fears about bringing it to light at our own dinner tables. So we avoid it. This is why we shouldn't be surprised when in another study, hundreds of 14-year-olds were asked for words they associate with mentally ill. Their top responses were disturbed, nuts, psycho, crazy, confused. So we come by our need to keep this hidden pretty honestly. It's why we couldn't see depression on the funny face of comedian Robin Williams, the elegant face of fashion designer Kate Spade, or the inquisitive face of culinary globetrotter Anthony Bourdain, or on the faces of our own loved ones, Bruce, Rebecca, Michael, Norman, Casey, and far too many others, who I will never, ever forget, who died far too soon, who I carry with me every single day of my rabbinate. The taking of one's life is not a rich or poor problem, nor is it a cultural phenomenon. In our world, every 40 seconds, someone kills themselves. Every 40 seconds in our world. 121 each and every day in the United States alone, of which 20 or more are veterans. It's pervasive across every country and every region of the world, and sadly, it's only getting worse. It's time we stop thinking about suicide as individual acts and begin thinking about the health of our entire human race. And yet I believe if we can resist our own default reactions, benign resistance, or conscious avoidance, we can make it possible for those who live with loneliness, alienation, or despair to hear what Megan Devine, what she writes about in her book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay. As counterintuitive as it might be to all that our culture, our media, and our personal principles tell us, it's time to do for mental illness what we've done for other realities of our day. Our parents wouldn't say the word cancer out loud. She's got cancer. In the 70s and early 80s, people were afraid to talk about AIDS. But now we do. People were afraid to talk about Alzheimer's. But now we do. But now it's time to make room at the table, to share or to just be with what we are living when it comes to mental illness. Because when you don't feel strong enough to stand, you can reach out your hand. Jewish tradition is filled with examples of those who struggled with these human ailments. For centuries, Judaism has understood depression and struggle to be part of life. For Moses who cried out, I can no longer bear the burden. I can no longer bear the burden of this people alone. It is too heavy for me. I can't do it anymore, he said. To King Saul, who was overcome by what the Bible calls a ruach ra'ah, a bad spirit, of which, if you look at how it's described, It may seem as if it's bipolar illness today. Our biblical ancestors faced the darkness. Jacob wrestled all night through a long, dark ravine in the darkness, alone and afraid. Jonah, whose story we recall on Yom Kippur, felt utter despair and tried to hide and put an end to his misery. Ours is a tradition replete with examples of those who asked to live in the world with brokenness. After all, Moses smashed the tablets, and the broken tablets and the whole tablets were all kept together in the ark. Brokenness and wholeness are part of who we are. In Judaism, we believe that body and soul are intrinsically connected, and our sages did not arbitrarily separate them. Then as now, we must be a community of understanding that sees the disease of mental illness as individual and unpredictable, as love and not separate it. And our call to action is to open up space for every one of us, to open up space wherever we can, for the dignity in each of us to be present and acknowledged, even when we bring to the table what is imperfect, the unfixable, the pain that has no answers. To do this, as uncomfortable as it is to say to so many in this holy sanctuary tonight that we know, that we absolutely know how it touches you and those you love. It's to say to 1 in 4 adults in this country, likely sitting next to you or down the row from you, who experience mental illness, that with or without words, it's okay. It's how we can say to approximately 61.5 million Americans, 20% of whom are youth ages 13 to 18, that if you want to share your stories matter. We just can't be silent anymore. So pervasive is mental illness that it's the leading cause of disability in America, costing an estimated $193.2 billion in lost earnings each and every year. In fact, by 2030, which isn't that long from now, by 2030, depression will outpace cancer, stroke, war, and accidents as the world's leading cause of disability and death. We can't be silent anymore. It begins with the simple willingness to hear, to talk out loud about mental illness and what it means to live, to work, to love, to thrive, or just survive day to day. What might it mean to someone important in your life or to a stranger if they knew that they had an open space without shame to describe what not okay is like? The brilliant contemporary writer and lecturer Andrew Solomon called depression, quote, the pain that forces itself on us against our will, emotional pain that takes over from other emotions and crowds them out, pain which takes away your ability to feel pleasure so that after a while you become absent from yourself. Martha Manning, in her book Undercurrents, described it this way: the emptiness of the depression turns to grief, then to numbness, and back again. My world is filled with underwater voices, people, lists of things to do. Every single inch of me aches. I can't believe that a person can hurt this bad and still breathe. It's not that I want to die, she writes. It's that I'm just not sure I can live like this anymore. And Kay Redfield Jamison, a world-renowned expert on bipolar disorder, described her feelings this way: no amount of love from any other person, and there was a lot, could help. No advantage of a caring family and fabulous job could be enough to overcome the pain and hopelessness that I felt. I knew my life to be a shambles, and I believed incontestably that my family, my friends, and patients would be better off without me. These thoughts are so hard to hear, but they're real, and they could be uttered by any number of people that we know. I don't read them for the shock value or as a voyeur into someone else's pain. I read them as a way to imagine how each one of us could hear those words and allow space for them. Maybe if we're able to speak freely about depression and anxiety, we can make the living better, even if we can't make life completely all right. I wonder if we can adjust our modern impulses to solve and resolve in order to walk along what Megan Devine calls in her book, the terrain, where we're not here to fix our pain, but to tend to it. And that's what we do. We tend to it. We cannot make it go away, but we can listen, and we can support. We need to be better. Am Shalom needs to be a community in which those suffering can be open about their struggles. We want to create a place where people feel less afraid. We can make things better even if we can't make them right. If you only look around, you will be found. Being alive in such a fleeting, tenuous world is so very hard. Our hearts will get broken in ways that can't be fixed. We need to know how to live here, where life as we know it can change forever at any time. The true bond of love and friendship is knit by how much we experience love and loss together. The conversation actually begins inside of each of us. I think that if we go back to the places where we talk about in our lives, our homes, our communities, and our public spaces, even here in our houses of worship, we can challenge ourselves to break the stigma that leads so many to keep our struggles inside, to keep our struggles private. Hard as it is, we must build practices that clearly say that we will show up for each other. We'll sit with each other in darkness if we have to, and listen with no expectation of outcome. It can happen on a walk, it can happen in a cafe, it can happen on the phone, it can happen in prayer, it can happen in meditation. It can happen when real interchange can take place. It's just about letting people know that the space is there. And if you're someone who feels embarrassed or self-conscious, let the space give you courage. Let this space give you courage to share and know that your story about not okay is okay, and that you are not alone. I met a most remarkable man recently, Johnny Boucher, who happens to be here tonight. Johnny was a former caddy at Twin Orchard Country Club. And in 2011, after his boss completed suicide, Johnny formed the foundation Hope for the Day, dedicated to proactive, not reactive ways to break the silence, remove the stigma around mental illness, and guide those in need of help and resources. And this summer, in May, he opened the very first coffee bar called Sip of Hope, the only coffee bar in the entire world where 100% of the proceeds go to suicide prevention and mental health education, where the baristas are trained and taught how to engage in conversations with people. Located on Fullerton and Logan Square, Sip of Hope does so much more than sell lattes and cold brews, because it's a safe place to go to talk and to process. On the wall is written in huge letters, "It's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be okay." And then on the other wall it says, in even bigger letters, "Have hope." After spending some time thinking about this sermon and reading and writing at Sip of Hope, I've come to understand some things just can't be fixed. They can only be carried. And we must continue to carry them, which is why you received a wristband on your chair tonight. I hope that you will put it on and you'll continue to carry it with you, or give it to someone else who might need it even more than you need it. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, because you'll reach up and you'll rise again. If you only look around, you will be found. So tonight, as we search our souls on this Kol Nidre, I pray from the deepest recesses of my heart, I pray that we see ourselves in the coming year pulling up a chair at our own tables to invite the hidden conversation in. I hope we can examine our own views and prejudices about mental illness and the words that we use to open people up or unwittingly shut them down. And as the shofar is sounded at the end of Yom Kippur, pushing us to the spiritual limit, let us find in ourselves the way to listen, hold up and embrace what is broken in those that we love and broken in ourselves. Blessed be the Holy One, who implants within us the spark of life, and today and forever, the seed of hope. Amen.